Hello everyone, welcome to Painting Crafty. If you're new here, my name's Melanie. Welcome, welcome. And for my returning art and craft friends, I'm so glad you're taking another art and craft break with me today. Today I'm going to be showing you a set of prim Halloween characters. I created them out of scrap wood and then added some wonderful little characters on the front. And if you would like the tracers for these characters, the templates, the patterns, whatever you might call them, go ahead and check out my Ko-fi page. I'm going to have a link to that down in my description box. You can go over there and grab the free tracers in case you would like to go ahead and make the characters that go on front. They're super cute and super easy to make because I'm going to be making them out of lunch bags again and painting them up and gluing them. So go over there and take a look. Today I'm a part of a YouTube collaboration called Halloween. We have two lovely hosts today. We have Martina with the Secret Craft Room and Dawn with Shabby Meets Bling. The links to their channels are inside of my description box, as well as the playlist for all of the other creators who are joined in today's collaboration. Take some time, check out their channels, and definitely click that list for the playlist. Well, let's go ahead and get started, and I'll show you how I made these prim Halloween items. For my wood pieces, I went directly to my scrap pile and chose some 2x6s. I cut them to lengths of 8, 7, and 5 inches tall. These are going to work perfect for my little characters. These are the characters I developed. I have a black cat, a little ghost, and a piece of candy corn. I started out with the color of pumpkin in the Waverly chalk paint. I don't know who invented chalk paint, but it's a great paint. You don't have to prime anything. It sticks to most items, and it worked perfectly for this project. I did 2 coats of it. It does sometimes get a little thick after you've had it for a while, and I've had this for about a year, but I was simply added a little bit of water to my brush, and it worked fine. To create my characters, I'm going to be using the brown paper lunch sacks. They work perfect for this project. I went ahead and I cut the bottom off the bag just to make it a little easier to line up my patterns. These are the patterns that you can find for free on my Ko-fi page. There's a link in the description box that'll easily lead you there. Simple to find. You can just go ahead and download them and use them as your own tracers if you would like to create this project. When I laid them down, this works great because you're automatically having 2 layers, and that's what you're going to need. You're basically going to be creating little pillows of characters. You're going to have those little extra pieces. No worry, just go ahead and drop those out and you won't be using those. Now to get these to act more like fabric, go ahead and scrunch up your paper sack. Do this a couple times. It's called conditioning your paper. You're breaking down the fibers and helping it work more like fabric. Once your pieces are cut out, you can go ahead and glue them together. I used hot glue for mine, but you could easily use some other sort of glue. It doesn't have to be hot glue. If you use hot glue, because the dry time is quick, go ahead and just do a small part of your area, put your pieces together, and make sure your seams are tight. If you're using a glue that has a little bit more open time like Elmer's, you probably don't have to be as careful. And then just proceed all the way around. You want to take your time on this step because you do want your edges to be closed, because you're basically making little pillow shapes, and we're going to be adding some stuffing inside of there to give it a dimensional look. Once your pieces are all glued over, now it's the time to go ahead and paint them. I like using a little bit more of a stiffer brush and applying my paint color. I still want a little bit of that brown paper bag showing through, so I'm going to be covering it with paint, but not all the way. Once your paint has dried, go ahead and condition your paper again. This is going to soften that paper and return it back to feeling more like a fabric texture. Up next, I'm going to be adding a little bit of coffee staining to each of my characters. A good ratio for coffee stain is 1 cup warm water and 1 tablespoon of instant coffee. It doesn't really matter which brand you use, so just buy the least expensive one you can find. I like using the coffee onto this project because it does add to the look of the prim look. It stains the lunch sack underneath and just tones that black paint and all the other paints really, really well. I'm going to be adding some fancy color treatments to a few of my characters. So I'm painting some paper just to make it look like fabric. I did some black, let it dry, and then I took the back of my paintbrush and put some white polka dots on the top. For another color, I ended up just using the back end of my paintbrush and applying some white paint. And I did make a third one as well. I took just my regular lunch sack and added some black dots on top. Once all the paint was dry, I did add some coffee staining on each one of those as well. The paint colors I chose to paint my candy corn are the Decor Spice Pumpkin, King's Gold from Apple Barrel, and I just chose a white from Apple Barrel as well. Traditionally, candy corn has the white color on the top, and then it's the pumpkin color in the very middle, and on the very bottom is the golden yellow color. This little brush I'm using, I purchased them at Walmart. They have a great bristle on them. It's a synthetic bristle, but it holds a really nice chisel end. They are in the children's area. They have a little triangle handle on it. I highly recommend adding this little paintbrush to your stash of paintbrushes. They're very inexpensive and they make a great straight line when painting these types of things. Once my item has dried and I reconditioned the paper, I go ahead and put the coffee stain on this one as well. Because this piece does have a little bit of white on it, I want to go ahead and tap it with a baby wipe. This just helps pick up a little bit of the coffee stain so it's not overly brown in the end. Up last is the little ghosty, so I'm just going to be basically painting him all white. He's going to look great with the coffee stain over the top because the coffee is going to sink down into those crevices and that texture is really going to pop. This is where I'm going to be adding a little bit of coffee stain to those papers as well. This really does tone that black down, adds a nice different prim look to all my papers, and just creates a really nice look. It's going to be looking like fabric in the end. Once I had all my papers all painted, I turned my attention back to my wooden pieces. I'm going to be using some 60 grit sandpaper to be able to sand back all the way to the wood. I want to be able to put some coffee stain over these items and really catch that wood texture underneath. Once I finish sanding, I go ahead and take just a chip brush and remove some of the dust. The chalk paint does tend to dust up a lot when you sand it, so you just want to make sure you remove that before you put your coffee stain on. The coffee stain really tones the pumpkin color of the chalk paint down to a nice, beautiful, rustic looking pumpkin color, which is perfect for this primitive looking piece that I want to create. Once I have my coffee stain applied, I simply use a paper towel and go over it just to brush down and push back the color back into my paint. I give my piece a dry and then I get out my Stays On ink in Timber Brown. I decided I wanted my edges even darker, and the ink was a good solution to accomplish this look of what I wanted to create. After applying the ink around the edges, I kind of decided perhaps I wanted more of that dark color towards the center of my piece. The perfect tool to use is a blending tool to be able to bring that color around my edges even more. The blending tool is just a nice way to be able to apply a soft halo around your piece without getting such strong lines. And I think it looks great. I did go back in and add a little bit more sanding. You can't get too rustic with these prim pieces, so it's a matter of dancing back and forth of adding color, sanding it off, and applying more. Do this until you like it, and I think I like it. I'm going to be doing one more step for the conditioning of the paper. My coffee stain has dried, my pieces are all glued together, so I'm going to go ahead and crinkle my paper a few more times just to be able to condition that paper fibers in there. The more you wrinkle it and open it up, the more it will really feel like fabric. I'm liking how all of these pieces are turning out. The coffee stain looks perfect. I'm seeing the texture of the lunch sacks underneath, and I love this way it looks for a prim look. Simple material, but a great look. This little tool I'm showing you now is a needle threader. It really is super handy. You simply slide that metal piece through the hole of your needle, and it has a little hook on the end. Slide your thread over the little hook and then pull your thread back. And voila, your needle is threaded. So much easier to do than to try to get that thread through that hole. I'm going to be using some Aunt Lydia cotton crochet thread. It works perfect for these little primitive pieces. I usually use the number 10 weight. I wanted to create some sort of unusual mouth for my little ghost. I had some little scraps of some black felt, so I started with that as the backing. And then on top, I had a piece of muslin. Now all of these are scraps. It's kind of what prim is all about. People would have just used what they had. And I simply did some stitching all the way across. I have my little wonky eyes, mismatched buttons. Say that fast 3 times. I looked at using just a round circle for a mouth, but I really do like this stitch look, so I'm going to stay with that. Next up was my little kitty creation. I took a little bit of muslin and then I pulled the threads on the sides just to give it more of a little rustic look, and then I put my little wonky buttons on top of there. For his whiskers, I took a little jute twine and I unraveled it and created a little nose just using some simple felt. I created a little mouth similar how I did my ghost, but this time I didn't put the black felt behind it. I think it's going to look really cute. To add a little darker edge to my paper pieces, I decided to use Ranger's ink in the color Vintage Photo. It just adds a really nice antique look to the edges of the paper. I put a little in the middle on his smile, just to darken it up just a tiny bit. I like how my pieces are coming together, and that prim look, it really does look fun. To add the 3D quality to my little prim characters, I'm going to be filling them with some polyfill. I have a little tool, I have no idea what it is. It's just a piece that I found on my scrap table, but it works perfect to be able to shove those little small pieces up into my ears and the small little areas of my characters. You could simply use a chopstick or a dowel or even the end of a pencil to be able to push your little polyfill pieces up into those areas. Once they're filled, I took a little bit of hot glue, put it on the edges, and I like to pull it tight and then close it in. And once it's closed, you have to hold it just a little bit for the glue to dry if you're using hot glue. But then you have these cute little pillows. Super fun characters. When you're filling your little characters and once you put your polyfill in, and you might notice that some of your edges didn't get all the way glued shut. No worries, you can just simply push that little polyfill back in, take a little bit of hot glue, and go ahead and re-glue your seam. It's an easy fix and simple to do, so no worries even if your seams aren't all the way closed. Give your hot glue a little chance to dry and then go ahead and keep on filling your pieces. I have my little characters all created with the buttons and their faces all done. So now it was time to go ahead and create that little ruffle look that I wanted to use these papers for. So I went ahead and created about a 2.5 inch strip, and then I went ahead and I tore the edges. I wanted an irregular look on my edge, and this was a simple way to create it. I'm going to be making these look like fabric, so I went ahead and I scrunched it up just like my other pieces to condition the fibers in that paper and to make it be able to fold more like fabric. I'm going to be creating a ruffle, so you can see me here using a needle, and I'm just pushing it back and forth and creating a ruffle shape. Once I had my needle pulled through my fabric, I went ahead and I pulled my needle and my paper tighter and made that little ruffle look. I'm going to be adding it onto the cat and the ghost. I had to experiment a little bit if it made more sense to glue the ruffle onto the paper first, or if it would make more sense to glue the characters on and then put the ruffle on. Here I'm trying the first process of gluing my ruffle on first, and then I will be gluing the cat on next. I didn't want it to look like it was just sitting all the way on top of that ruffle, so I went ahead and I applied a little bit of glue first, and then I placed my kitty cat, and I thought perhaps maybe some of the ruffle would look good as if it was sitting on the top of the cat as well. You do have to hold the glue down just a little bit so your character will stick. Once I had him positioned, I went ahead and gave his ears a little bit of a tweak so it wasn't just so flat, to add a little bit more 3D quality to him. This time I decided I would go ahead and glue my ghost on first, and then I would glue the ruffle on. Again, I had to kind of hold him down a little bit, take a little bit of minutes just to let that glue dry. He's glued just in the middle, so I have a little bit of flexibility of how I can place my ruffle underneath him. And this time I put a little bit of glue underneath the sides. Since my bottom's not glued all the way down, I was able to have some flexibility of how to put my ruffle. So I tucked some under, put some on the top, and then tucked a little bit more around the edge. I'm really liking how these ruffles are looking. After experimenting with both ways to glue on the characters, I think I decided I liked the idea of gluing the character on first, but leaving the bottom open so that there was a little bit of room to adjust the ruffles all the way around. This way I was able to tuck some on the bottom and on the top of my character. The candy corn piece was not getting a ruffle, but I needed to add something extra to this piece as well. I decided to go ahead and add a piece of muslin all the way around the candy corn. This would just be an easier way to attach it, so I didn't glue this on until after all of my decorations were done on my candy corn. I knew I was going to be adding additional layers on top, so I just simply crisscrossed my muslin piece and glued it flat. I wanted to be able to add a little bit of extra decorations in the middle by adding some extra strings and some little extra fabric, and then include a button. I figured the other items had buttons on them, and adding a button to this piece of candy corn would just be a great little accent to finish this piece off. To bring even a little bit more of the flavor from the other characters into my candy corn, I took a little bit of the paper that I had used for the ruffles and created a tag. I wrote the number 31 on there and attached it with a rusty little safety pin. Let's take a look at what all of these little pieces look like. So here's the ghost, love that little sewn smile, and here's the kitty cat with his funky little whiskers and his wonky eyes. And I love the way the ribbon looks all around their necks. Now it's time to put these pieces together. I decided I wanted to add some wooden spools to kind of look like wheels on the bottom. And then each of my piece, I was going to put a spindle at the top. I chose to hot glue the spindles and the spools on these items. I love having these items. I also like to be able to reuse them. So hot glue is temporary, but it'll work for this to be able to put these pieces together, but I can easily take them apart if I decide I would like to use them for something else. I'd like to say a special thank you to Don and Martina for hosting today's collaboration. Check out their channels inside of my description box. Go ahead and click that playlist and see what all the other creators are creating today. I'm sure you'll be inspired to create something fun for fall or Halloween. And here's a final look of my Prim crew all put together. I think they look great sitting on my fireplace. If you're new to my channel and you like to do art and crafts, come on over and check out my channel. I'd love to have new subscribers join me. Give me a thumbs up and leave me a comment if you like to do prim crafting as well. Well, hopefully you'll come back and see me again, and next time you'll create right along with me.